Hello, everyone. Ooh, excuse me. Hello, everyone, and I am live yet again, just running a little late. I am about to invite my co-host of the week. If I see him, I thought he noted that he was live, but we shall see. I see him. Perfect. In about 3, 2, 1. We'll see if he. This is his first time, so let's see. Hello. Can you hear me? I can hear something. You're buzzing. Hello, hello. I wonder. Okay, we'll figure this out. We'll figure this out. Let's see. Little sound difficulties right now. So if you can hear me on my side, let me know. We'll see which side we're having the issue on. But we will be talking, hopefully, in a few minutes about writing and books and everything in between.
I can hear you now.
Perfect.
Keep going.
Okay, there we go. Hello, hey, how are you? Think we're still having a little technical difficulties. That's okay. We'll solve this momentarily. But how's everyone's week going? It is Wednesday. Coming off of a holiday weekend on my end, so still the days are all blurred together. Let's see if I can get him back. Hello again.
Hello, can you hear me this time?
Yes, I can.
All right, there you go. Sorry about that. My AirPods weren't connecting. It was strange. So,
It's
but
fine.
thank you
I
very
don't know.
much.
Yeah, I don't know how like all the parameters of lives work, and I've never had someone use earbuds before, so there you go. That maybe there is some glitch in the system that needs to be resolved down the line. But
It's all right. It's all good. We're here now.
exactly, that's kind of the point. So, welcome. Take a breath.
Thank you very much for having me.
Always pleasure. But just wanted to let you know, since you've never done these before, how I always structure my lives is I'll let my co-host of the week, which is you, introduce yourself, tell us about what you write, whatever you typically like to say as your author spiel, and then I'll do the same on the flip side because we always get new people chiming in periodically, and then from there we'll go where the day takes us.
That sounds great. And my name's JV Hilliard. I am an author of epic fantasy and dark fantasy combined. So if you like The Hobbit meets Dracula or Game of Thrones meets Underworld, I'm the guy for you. The kind of books I write are fairly lengthy, as you can tell by the name epic. In epic fantasy, they're usually a little
Mm-hmm.
over 500 words. But the ideas for my novels came from a lifelong passion of mine, Dungeons and Dragons. I've been playing it since I was, in high school, and many of the ideas for the campaigns we played as role
Mm-hmm.
players, and me in some cases as a dungeon master, I've turned them into, kind of my own realm of Warminster, which is the name of the saga, and it's a 4-book saga. It's published by Dragon Moon Press out of Canada, and if you can't tell by the name Dragon Moon Press, they publish things that are fantasy and sci-fi related. And I'm in book 2 right now. I've got book 1, which is The Last Keeper, was launched last December and did pretty well. Book 2, Vorden's Lair, launched back in September and has also got some momentum. Books 3 and 4, which will complete the series, will be out right after the holidays this year. And then the last in the series will be out sometime in late spring and early summer. So if you're a fan of Dungeons and Dragons or Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, any Brandon Sanderson stuff, any of that kind of stuff, I think you're going to like the Warminster saga.
That is so neat. I'll have to go into depth about a few things there in a moment.
Sure.
But for anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Katharine Wibell. I'm an author of also epic fantasy in different genres, though. So I have 3 different series currently, one of which I'll kind of go from youngest to oldest, is geared more to the young adult side. It is a coming of age portal fantasy set in a magical multiverse with 12 magical worlds, multiple dimensions, and pretty much it's a free-for-all of all different kind of mythological beast beings and the like found in those realms. And the first one starts with the 12 Tasks, and its sequel, The Vagarian Sire, is already out. The third will actually release in the beginning part of next year, and I'll be attempting, knock on wood, my first Kickstarter campaign for a book to kind of kick that one off. So we'll see how that goes. I've heard good things from authors who like that processes, but it'll be all new to me. Now, getting a little darker towards the dark fantasy, because that one's a little more on the noble bright side, on the positive side of things, a little more Tolkien versus J.R.R. Martin, but so that's my young adult series. Getting a little older, you have my new adult war shifter fantasy called the Incarn Saga. They're 4 books. It's a complete series, my only complete series at the moment. It starts with the Tsar's Claws, the one in blue, and it's set in a kingdom on the verge of war where both races, the humans and the shapeshifters, have to decide if they can put aside their differences and help each other fend off a greater threat. So that's kind of the baseline premise, and it goes from there. And my final series is even darker than that. It is a almost grim dark towards the end of it, Viking fantasy. So it's set in and around Norse mythology. You could almost say a dark retelling of Norse mythology. You're going to explore all 9 realms and around Yggdrasil, the World Tree. There are 8 of my tentatively 16 out right now. They're novellas, they're quick reads, and you can might see them. They're very dark. I can never figure out the lighting in my room, so they look very dark in my little background thing. I promise you they're a lot brighter when you see them in person. But again, that is my range of epic fantasy, and kind of like what you were saying, I do like to write on the little lengthier side, though with the novellas, it was a fun challenge to see if I could complete a story in a far more short, succinct way, and so that was my challenge with those. But in the end, they'll be 16, so it will be kind of saga-like in the sense, because you string them all together towards the end. But so going back to you, starting off with Dungeons and Dragons, actually in COVID, when that whole shebang happened, one of the things that I got into or started getting into was Dungeons and Dragons, and kind of, I guess, going through different campaigns and creating my own character through that. I guess maybe it's a writer brain, but I just was obsessing about my character I created, her backstory, and it's one of the things I'm interested down the line is creating I don't know if I should call it fan fiction, because it's going to be changed enough where, again, it's not going to be set in that universe at all, but kind of, so I want to know, how do you qualify your books as a fan fiction kind of subgenre, or is it, how do you differentiate that in your
Yeah.
original
Well,
version?
I don't mention anything about Dungeons and Dragons in the book. It's its own realm. It's its own magic,
Mm-hmm.
its own races. It's its own, monsters, which I call cryptids. It was derived from my playing. So there's a
Yeah,
born from, inspired by,
yeah.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
kind of the way I would describe the series and the ideas behind it. But I created my own realm. There's so much you can only borrow from
Oh,
Tolkien.
yes.
I can't
Yes.
write in Earth, and I can't write in Forgotten Realms, nor can I write in
Mm-hmm.
Westeros. So I write in Warminster, and I created Warminster, knowing that the first 4 novels in the Warminster series would kind of launch a variety of other things if they were successful, so that I can do exactly what you're doing. On the novella side, I've had requests for people to write fan fiction for characters that they liked, or requests from people, even more to the point, not to kill certain characters because they liked them. I had one person say that one of my bad guys was like my Boba Fett, and please don't kill him. And that'd be what you're like. What do you? But on the fan fiction side, the closest I can walk to it is the fact that many of the ideas in the novel were derived from actual gameplay. Now, not to the point and not to the same system. I made a painstaking steps to make sure that they were divided from that. But I've
Mm-hmm.
seen very successful authors do that. R.A. Salvatore started out as a fan fiction writer for the Dark Elf trilogy. He basically married up his own character, which is now in Dungeons and Dragons lore, and was able to eventually write with TSR and Wizards of the Coast and the stuff that he's doing there. I took a different tact. I wanted to create something that was on my own, borrow from the masters like Tolkien, borrow from the masters like Martin, or those that are related to role playing. But I think anybody that reads the novels will be able to cast themselves into that. They'll be able to see that some of the characters were made out of decisions that might have been derived from role playing, or me on the dungeon master side. I as an author have a hard time just sitting down and writing. I know a lot of people are pantsers and they could sit down and write by the seat of their pants. I am the opposite of that. I am a super duper planner. And for me, it's almost like being a dungeon master. Instead of telling the story verbally like you would in front of a group of 6 or 7 people that you're playing the game with, I've taken it and memorialized it into fiction. And that's a different kind of medium, right? Like when you're a storyteller and you're sitting around, I've done it. And if you've played the game, and it sounds like you have, you as a dungeon master, you can tell when everybody's on par with you, like everyone's in sync. There's a look in their eye. People know what's going on. You're describing something so well that they're there with you. And taking that, and a skill as a storyteller, and then kind of flipping it on its head, and now I'm writing it. It's hard to make sure that people kind of pull along. So I have a tendency to write dense, and rich things. I try to world build in a way that, when people leave, they'll remember things about the realm of Warminster that are unique to the realm of Warminster. I think that was important, not just as a launch of a new series, but also I think, as in my head, from a legacy perspective, like you're doing, you have an 8 to 16 book saga. That's where I think this is going. I think it'll stop at 4, and then there'll be a break in a next series, and maybe a couple of origin stories that are in the novella size, or in the novella range. I would think maybe a little shorter than that, just a background, because I've gotten a lot of readers come back and say, I want to know the story of Blue Connie, or I want to know the story of In Canis Drew Waith, who's my Boba Fett, like that kind of stuff. So, and that's fun. It's just you have to kind of kickstart the series, and give people a story that they can latch onto, and then ask them to want more. And I'm getting some of that traction now, so I'm pretty pleased with it.
Well, that's great. That
Yeah.
is great because, you're for someone who writes as large of books as you heard, because I was looking at your work on Amazon before I got on, and, you're doing like the 400 or 500 page, books right there, and those are meaty, but to have them all, I guess, let me ask you, have you written all of them in the series and you're just waiting to release them? Because it still sounds like you release them relatively fast for a 500-page book
Yeah.
series.
So the third book is written and is in editing right now. The
Okay.
fourth book is in skeleton form, but I'm a goofy left-handed. Like I write backwards to front. So like
Okay.
when I write my novels, I write the ending first, and I have kind of a whiteboard, so you can see where this planner thing comes in. I've got the board, and after everything comes off the whiteboard, I knew everything that's in the novel is supposed to be in the novel, right? And I'll erase it as I go, and that way I'll know the ends of the novels and then write backwards to front. And I don't know if that's unique or just a goofy left-handed kind of thing that I do, but it's like reverse engineering to make sure I didn't miss
Mhm.
anything. And I like to say that there's no empty real estate in my novels, because if it's in there, it's in there for a reason. And sometimes it can be as simple as I mentioned before, world building, or something that's a characteristic of the realm, like the kind of like a monetary system that they have, like, or the languages that they speak, and just trying to step away from the tropes of it always being dwarves and gnomes and hobbits and stuff like that, and having true but relative, character classes and races you might find
Mhm.
in some of that traditional role playing or traditional, high fantasy stuff.
I love that. That is absolutely neat. No, I love trying to hear where everybody gets their inspiration because each person is totally different. And so, having been a dungeon master for a number of years and working with a bunch of different characters in kind of a board game play or virtual online play, depending on how you're running your campaigns, are you writing, or like, does your books follow multiple perspectives, or are you kind of a one person with a wide cast around it? Does that make
Uh,
sense?
yeah, no, it's multiple POVs. It maybe it's the way that I write, and it may not be a traditional point of view where you have a single main character and you're seeing through his or her eyes. In my world, I give you 3 protagonists and a villain in change, right? Like you sometimes see through the eyes of the villains, because I think that offers a better perspective on things, and you
Mm-hmm.
sometimes want to surprise the reader by presenting them from a side that they didn't expect. And I also think that helps you build characters for your bad guys. Like if your
Mhm.
big bad evil guy is just big bad and evil, that that to me isn't good enough. I want my readers to know that they weren't born evil. Like something happened to them. They made a choice and it went sideways, or something happened in their life and it pushed them in a direction and they haven't been able to come back from. And in the same way, a lot of very, very popular villains, Darth Vader to name one, has a shot at redemption. And do those characters in the novels take it? And I think it's important that you can see through their eyes and you understand what it is that they're thinking and why they're doing what they do. You might not agree with it, but you might be able to understand it. And I think their struggle is important. Their decisions are important, and that's sometimes you can't show that through the singular point of view kind of eyes. You can only presume things, and I would rather my readers see them through their eyes. And so, even though that's a bit risky, and sometimes it could be jarring, I try to make sure that my chapters are all within a single point of view, but it's the point of view that's important for that chapter, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I can understand. Well, I wish I could write at this moment kind of like you. I am a person who so far sticks with one point of view throughout the whole book series. It is limiting, depending on how you want to tell a story, and I can't do the same things as people have read and the Song of Ice and Fire, because I can't show you what's happening outside of where she has been along her journey. But what I like to do on my full length books is I'll usually have a prologue and epilogue, and I know some people love them and some people don't like the concepts of prologues and epilogues. I like incorporating them because in those I get to tap into a different person's point of view. And so a lot of times I do kind of give you a snippet of like one of the villains or what's going on elsewhere, and it's kind of my workaround, because once I get into chapter 1, then it goes back to my main character's point of view for my books. Though down the line, I think I would love to challenge myself to maybe do a 3-person, 3 different character storyline. But it's hard for my head to wrap around that because I have yet to approach that kind of style of writing, and I'm a
It's
little
okay.
intimidated.
Well, no, I mean, look, I like it in the same way that some of my favorite novels have different points of view in them. Like
Mm-hmm.
look, sometimes you're seeing through Frodo's eyes, other times you're seeing through Aragorn's eyes, and I
Yep.
think that for me, that's helpful for epic fantasy. It keeps pulling people along, and I think there are things that are going on that you would want the reader to know, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's the generation of television, and streaming, where you can see through Jon Snow's eyes in one scene and Daenerys
Oh yeah.
Targaryen's eyes.
Yes.
So maybe that's a little bit is leaked into my brain, and that's why it works. But also, I think that adds depth to some characters that are important,
Mm-hmm.
and people walk away even though they might hate them. Like the "Don't kill your Boba Fett" comment was, he's an assassin. He's a jerk. He's a
Yep.
bad guy. You should be cheering against him, but they liked him because they saw through his eyes, and I think that was and I, like you, I love epilogues and prologues. I don't always use them, but I think I use my prologues in all of my books to date as an introduction to the villain that's important in that book, so that you
I
can
like that.
something that's happened to them. And I get
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the dark fantasy that I like, because usually when you're writing from a villain's point of view, something bad's happening. It's not they're not at a birthday party, right? Like something
Yeah.
is really gone
Probably not.
wrong, off the rails, so like, and that's fun, and showing people like a peek behind the curtain so that they can see, where the
Mm-hmm.
character is coming from. They can identify with them later and say, what, this guy's I'm cheering against them, but I understand why he got to where he is, right? Or why she did what she did. And that way, I think it adds a realism, which is important for fantasy, because there's no realism in fantasy. So
Mm-hmm.
you're getting grounds for suspension of disbelief by doing that. And I think it's easier. So it's just not a bad character in a video game. It's literally, this person has fiber. This person has meat on the bone, and I can cheer for them in a quirky kind of way to see if they do choose a path of redemption, or do they go the other way, stuff like that. And I think that's fun.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. And kind of going back to that comment of my character that is inspired by my D&D play, and kind of working in the back of my head of like her potential storyline and world building that I have to create around her and everything. But she's one of those that I would like to write in either an anti-hero, or haven't decided yet, which is exciting for me because usually I know the end game of all my characters right off the bat. I haven't decided if anti-hero with the redemption qualities near the end, or if she's going to slide full dark. But I, again, haven't been able to dedicate a lot of thought process to that because I'm releasing 2 other series simultaneously, and I've told myself, finish one before I start another. That is it. That is all I can do. But for your villains, are each of your books, or do each of your books have a totally different villain, or are they just ebbing and flowing throughout the whole series?
Yeah, well, the main characters are engaged in sort of this epic battle of good and
Mm-hmm.
evil, chosen one versus false prophet kind of thing, and
Mm-hmm.
in my first series. And so, not to be a spoiler alert here, but hey, bad things are going to happen to some people in the book, but
Yeah,
there's
well,
still
dark
kind of
fantasy.
end to the big bad battle, right? Like the big epic battles at the end of each of the books. So they do get pulled through, and I think that's important to keep people cheering against them. But eventually, one side's going to win something, and that's the way it is. And there's usually some of that in each novel. I think it keeps pulling the story through, as you kind of mentioned. But I also think that what I've done is, as I'll give you a perfect example of one, and it's one that I kind of regret and then I don't. Um, my wife and her best friend gave me this idea for the dumbest character in the novel. It was so dumb, so dumb. And in my head, I twisted it up in my dark fantasy kind of way. And
Mm-hmm.
this character, she was a madam at a bordello, but she was a cryptid, which is my form of monster.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a conjoined twin, and they were these evil
Oh.
joined twins, right? And they ran this bordello, and they would sell information and sell other things, and some bad things happen there. But she really only I should say, because there's 2 of them, they only really appear in the back end of novel 2 and the beginning of novel 3. But the reaction to that, I was like, oh, this is great. It's such a unique character, and you could despise this person because they're or them because they're so naughty. And then I realized I just turned my wife and her best friend into basically prostitutes in the book. And I went to them and I was like, "Hey, I got this great. This is what I did with your idea. Do you like it?" And they're looking at me like, "Well, you made us a madam and a board. Like, what are you talking about?" It was like the total opposite of what they asked for, but I thought mine was better, and I thought they would be happy with it. And that's the author mind, where you're like, "Oh, this is really good. I got to twist it and
Mm-hmm.
make it work. It's something unique." And then you realize, oh, you just kind of kicked somebody in the teeth with it and didn't even know. But it's really worked out well. I've gotten a good response from the Ophidian, which is what this creature is named. And she runs the Twin Snakes Bordello, which there's a
Great.
play on words there with Ophidian, but it's pretty cool. In all honesty, I like having small minor characters that have a big impact because I think that's fun, and they're also in some ways disposable. Like if they don't come back, you don't call them back into a novel. That's okay too. They had their role, or if they need to be dispatched,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah.
that's all right as well. They just have to be somebody that the reader likes to read about, even if it's for a short time.
Yeah, no, I was asked by an acquaintance, and she was really excited that she was meeting an author, and she was, I was telling her like I'm on the dark fantasy side. At that point, I was just like, I write, those stories where you can't necessarily guarantee that the character you like is going to survive, kind of stories. And she turned to me and she was like, "Can you put me in one of your books and then end me?" And I was like, "What? Is that really you really want?" And she was like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
told her, I was like, if I can ever figure out how to stick someone like you into a book and make it work, I will do that. But as of yet, I haven't felt like I'm not going to force a character in there. They have to feel organic. But that was probably the weirdest request that I had so far as an
Yeah.
author.
That's a cool one though. And when you do that, you got to send her a free copy, right? Just
There you go. Yes.
give the acknowledgement section, throw her name in there.
Exactly. Apologies to so and so. I have, as they say on this platform, unalived your character.
No, that's pretty cool. If you could make that work, that's cool.
We shall see. We shall see. So let me ask you, since you have two books out, you already have three definitely well in the works, four already, in the, as you said, the kind of skeleton, the bare bones aspect of it. So how was your marketing strategy, being still a relatively newish author? How was your marketing strategy going into your first release? Because I kind of looked and I was like, you have a number of great reviews and everything out there already. And for me, I did everything wrong with my first release. So it's only taken me the past couple years to kind of finally figure out how to do the marketing thing. And I wish I knew a lot of that stuff originally. And I feel like I'm always scrambling to catch up where I feel like I should have been at this point if I did everything the right way. But yeah, so how was your marketing strategy going into the publishing world?
Well, I looked at it as an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 28, so that's not, I've owned a number of businesses, exited some of them successfully, some of them not so successfully. But the play was looking at it as I was the brand and my books were the product. And when you're dealing with a retail sale kind of business, uh, marketing is king, right? You have to be able to advertise in some way, and some of that is like retail sales. Other that is you're literally are grassrootsy. I'm going to conventions, I am going to bookstores, I am signing at libraries, I'm doing
Mm-hmm.
TikTok lives to promote the novels and interest in the novels, but then also making sure that some of the things that I didn't come out clean either. The first one was tough. I got lucky. I have a great publisher, and I put a good team around me of people that knew what they were doing, and I did that knowing that I was treating it like a business. It was like, hey, if I'm going to do this, there's a sunken cost here, and some of that is going to be in this first book. I'm not going to make much money, if anything at all, and it's a loss.
Mm-hmm.
Second, and then the third where you start to make money, and the fourth is when you really start to make money. And I
At
think,
least one hope.
yeah, one would hope, right? Yeah. So, but that's the plan is treating, at least in my opinion, the way that I handled it was treat it like a business, treat it like you're investing in this and this is what you want it to be. Because my day job prior to this was not this. You mentioned COVID earlier. I really didn't start writing until COVID. I was busy doing the stuff that I did for the first 20 years of my career, and that's how I made my money. And then I started doing this when everything was shut down, and you're like, wow, like, man, did I make a mistake? I should have started this right out of college. This is the way I want to live my life. This is so much fun.
Uh-huh.
And in order to make that possible, it has to be successful. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like Cortez comes to the new world. You just burn the boats. You don't look back. The only way forward is success. Is you have to treat it in that same way. So I've done interviews. You get up at midnight, because someone's in Australia, or you're doing things, and you could go to a book signing and get five people, and that happens sometimes. But those are five people that I got their email addresses from, and
Mm-hmm.
now I'm going to hit them on the next one, and so you just have to look at it very aggressively. I think.
Oh yeah.
Is that you just can't throw something out into the ether and hope that someone buys it. They don't.
That
They're
was
not.
my plan originally, and it failed. So I agree with those words.
Yeah, I mean, just look at it in terms of how many. Just if I were an indie author and I was promoting this on Amazon, I mean, there are 80,000 new books that hit Amazon's
Hmm.
digital shelves on a monthly basis. I mean, that's a sea of people that look a lot, and you're all trying. We all, my books look like your books, and your books look like someone else's, because that's the way they're supposed to look. And you just got to take advantage of the opportunities to present themselves. And for me, sales has always been a contact sport. So you have to contact people through, use the resources you've got, free social media like this. I mean, this is only, the only, this is just time, right? So we have to make sure that when we're talking about this, that we're engaging with folks that are paying attention. They've got questions they might be interested in reading, and you've got to be responsive to them in the same way you would be if it was a business. And I know that's different for a lot of authors, because authors have a tendency to be introverted. I am the
Now, after joining this platform, that a lot of them, a huge proportion, it sounds like, do claim to be an introvert, and I'm the opposite. I like I like talking, maybe too much, but it's just a very different way to approach it. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. Sorry, continue.
No, no, that was you picked up where I was leaving off. I mean, I think using a platform like this or using other platforms, whether it's social media, whether it's traditional earned media that you're getting through, interviews that you can find in radio or podcasts or TV, and just really digging. And what I've done is gather those. There's a little bit of a sunken cost that goes into that, right? Like I use Matchmaker, I use Podmatch, and these are systems that allow me to find shows that I can be a guest on. And sometimes they're not 100% fits, right? Like you and I write the same stuff. This is 100% fit, right? And you and I also have tendency to gifted gab, I think, and so this, really good connection. But, for some, they may not know where to go to get that done
Hmm.
and have a name, or you've got, a big five publishing house that's going to push you and get you on those shows. People don't know who you are, so you've got to reach out to them, and they're not always going to say yes. And sometimes they're going to require you to be at a certain stage, and you just have to take note of that and come back and realize that that's when you're going to be good for their business too. And,
Hmm.
no's motivate me, and I want to get to a point where I can get back to them and say, hey, look, now I'm ready for your show or whatever it is. And so I just try to take advantage of as much of that as I can, and be out in the community, even if it's 2 or 3 readers at a time, gathering them up. That all starts to cobble together a nice email list of people that are ready for your next pre-order.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I love that. Yeah, no, I was that person who kind of dropped the book and was like, be free, and wondered why it wasn't doing anything for the longest time. But I also at that point didn't know what I was missing, because I don't know what you don't know what you don't know. So I didn't know what I was missing. I didn't know who to ask. I didn't know what to ask because I just didn't get it. And it took me a while to kind of stumble upon, this kind of resource or that kind of resource, or this particular author who was like, "Oh, have you heard of And I was like, "No, I haven't." And it kind of builds up after a while. So it's very nice, I think, for the authors who've released in the past few years, because I feel like the writing community on whatever platform or wherever you are is fairly open, and hopefully on the friendlier side. I've never really had any kind of issue of meeting and sharing information and being able to help each other. So if someone is about to release their first book, they're doing it the best they can do.
Yeah.
As if that happened to me.
Yeah, it's just so I this is so my day job prior to this, I did government affairs. I was a lobbyist for defense
Hmm.
and technology companies in DC. And the opposite is true. Everybody is cheering for you to fail.
Wow.
It's all adversarials, all ground zero. Like literally, it's a zero sum game. Like if I win for my client, that means you lost for yours. And my first interview, I spent 2 days being prepared, waiting for that gotcha moment that was going to come from the interviewer. I had everything in my head, like, all right, this is what I'm going to say if they ask this kind of question. It was a legit study, which I would typically do for any kind of earned media I would be doing for my clients. And that interview turned me, I was like, what? Like, it literally was a light bulb. When they asked, well, what season of the year do you prefer to write in? I realized at that moment, I was like, this person really wants to help me. Like, what what's this? Like I wasn't used to it. And so it went from this, adversarial situation that I was in to a very mentally healthy, how can I help you, complementary system where we're all out there trying to help one another. And it's good. It's okay if you're selling books, and I'm helping you sell books, and vice versa. It's like we're all on the same team. We all want each other to succeed. And so I experienced the exact same thing from the way opposite angle, coming back on this, where you found people that really were out there to try to help you. And I spent time talking to them. I would talk to my copy editor, I talked to my development editor, I talked to my publisher, I talked to my illustrator, and found out what they thought the marketplace, like, because you're right. I mean, we're authors, but in order for us to be successful, we're in a marketplace that's selling something. um
Yeah.
and so it's great to give away stuff from time to time, and I don't mind doing that, in the right circumstances. But
Mhm.
you look at it as promotional, right? In any kind of business, you see that. But at the end of the day, in order for you to be successful, you need to sell books, right? And you just have
Yeah.
to that business.
Yep. And yeah, that's, I think, one of the things I was so hesitant about trying to delve into the advertising and marketing side of being, because I'm a true indie author at the moment. And it was because I had some real bad PTSD from being a Girl Scout and trying to knock on doors and ask people to buy these cookies. And I absolutely hated it, hated the concept of marketing and everything that, even today, even though I feel more confident, let's just say more confident in my field of marketing and advertising, it's still, when I hear those words, I sometimes have that cringy feeling because it's hard for, as much as I like to talk and, talk about my books, I'm okay with that. It's this weird thing I have to like mentally wrap my head around, that I have to market. But it's not really that scary once you get used to it. And, there are totally different, if you wanted to do, like we were saying, the free social media aspect, there are so many platforms, and maybe you don't like the face-to-face things of one, but, there are others that are geared more to beauty shots of books like Insta, or, quick little snippets of information like Twitter. But there's something out there for you to be able to get your book in front of other people in different ways. And then also, it never does hurt for you to look into the advertising side of things too, if you're marketing your whole book yourself. But you've mentioned a couple times that you have a publisher, so you hybrid, like, how do you consider yourself as an author? Like, I'm indie. How would you categorize yourself?
Well, traditionally published, but
Okay.
understanding that it's a small genre specific, how
Mm-hmm.
there's some limitations there. So in the event that we do want to do advertising, or in the event that I do want to put time and effort into something, most of the time that's either a split cost and something that I'm bearing as an author trying to advance my business, in this case the novels, or it's something we just decide is it's just not affordable, and you move on from there. And I think that what I've found is there's no real one way to do things, right? Like it would be great to be indie because all of that revenue comes back to you, right? But
Theoretically. Yes.
yeah, right, yeah, but well, right, almost. But also, you don't have sage advice from time to time. You don't have
Mm-hmm.
eyes in the marketplace that you wouldn't have gotten. And
Yeah.
why I try to talk and plug into to opportunities like this is you learn just us talking things that you've used that have been successful and haven't been successful. And I can use some of that, and maybe we're providing that to other viewers that are going to take a look at this and say, oh wow, I didn't know that was available to me, or I didn't realize how important that was to the success of my efforts. And therefore they're learning on the fly. And I think that kind of stuff helps the marketplace, because it's turned away from the traditional stuff so much, and in
Mm-hmm.
part because they're running like 100-year-old business plan. The
Yeah.
idea of sending a novel to somebody and waiting a year for a response is ridiculous, right? It's just ridiculous. Or I have to get an agent to give away part of my stuff so that they can give it a book to somebody, and then I can't show it to.
Yeah, that one gets me too. It's like, hey, I will take an agent anytime, because it does open doors, which is irritating because you need an agent to open certain doors. Even if I wasn't doing the traditional publishing route, you still need an agent to open certain doors, which I think I found is fascinating and a little sad for an indie person like myself.
No, it's and what I learned was, and I said this in my old business, and it's the same thing holds true here. If you're going to court, you take a lawyer. If you're going in front of the IRS, you take your accountant. And the same thing holds true here. Is if you don't understand a marketplace you're about to leap into, you better go in with someone that's a professional, and agents do that. Or if you've got a small publisher like mine, they help you do that. They'll let you understand what's good and bad, and why you should and shouldn't do things, or what the
Yeah.
disadvantages are. And they're not always hard, or they're not always easy to secure. I get that. But like I have a friend of mine. In fact, this is a short story. Though when I wrote my novel over COVID, I thought it was a novel. It's like a bucket list thing. I was going
Yep.
to whatever, and I shared it with a friend of mine who was an associate professor at a local community college, and she was like, you've got something here, but your genre usually writes in series and not one-offs. I knew that tacitly in the back of my head. I knew that, but until she said it, I didn't realize it. And I was like, oh, so what you're telling me is I can't just write one. I need to write at least three, so that it's genre specific. And then when I went to my illustrator, I had some ideas for the cover, and she said, "Yeah, that's great, but that's not what other books in your genre look like." And again,
That's a big one. That's a big one.
it, and so you learn from other professionals that are in that space. And so even though I thought I had a great idea for a cover, the better cover was the one that was going to sell the book. And even though
Mhm.
everything I wanted on it, it didn't matter. It has to look a certain way so that, and I fall victim to that too. When I'm walking through a Barnes and Noble on a Saturday, picking out a book to read on the weekend, and I look at something I find myself grabbing, and what do? You look at the cover first. And if you
Yeah.
like it, pick it up, and then you turn it over and read the blurb. In my
Yeah.
head, what value? Anybody can write a blurb, and then you try writing a blurb,
No.
and you're like, do
One of
this.
my weakest points right there.
Like it's crazy. Like there are people out there that have a business just helping you write blurbs, and you don't know the nuances. And like you said, it's like a land war in Asia. You just keep walking, and you just have to learn as you go because you don't know where you're going. There's just so much to learn, and it's
Yeah, it's overwhelming in the beginning, definitely overwhelming. And it would be nice to have like a one place to go where it's like, here's step by step, here's what you need to know at this point, here's what you could go into, but to not overwhelm you. Here's the little steps, here's like walk me through baby steps. That would be nice. But so far I've not found anything that does it that way. I can't find any like thing to recommend to someone else that way yet.
it sounds like someone needs to write a book on how to do
Oh no.
writing a book.
I wonder who would be good at writing books. Maybe I'll find an author there.
I don't know.
Oh
I have to
man.
look
But
around.
no, yeah. For my first series, I was kind of similar to Stumbling Blocks, where interestingly enough, my young adult series that I'm finally getting to, that was the series I always knew I wanted to write for years and years and years. But what I did was I came up with another story, and it was so vibrant when I kept thinking about it that I decided I wanted to put it out there as a debut book because I didn't want to go straight into my other series knowing that everybody gets bitter, as you write. And so I wanted to have my debut book out there. I didn't want to have those stumbling blocks as I was trying to, put out the books that I'd been thinking about and been passionate about for years. So it was supposed to be a one and done. And of course, 4 book series later, it wasn't a one and done, but it works better for, like you said, the genre being more on the epic fantasy side of things. It's better to write in a series, at least a small series at minimum. Though then you look at Wheel of Time and you could go on for books
Like
and books and books.
yeah,
But yeah, so I totally understand some of that and working in the genre because, again, doing everything wrong. My first book's cover was the way I had it envisioned. I really liked it, but it wasn't genres, wasn't right for the genre. And it was one of the plethora of reasons why my book didn't go where for so long was because I didn't know what I was missing. And then finally starting to figure out different lectures and podcasts and other things to listen to and learning that, you really have to look into your genre. If you're cover designing and everything, start doing that research and restructured everything and then started making sales. Look at that.
yes, yeah, yeah. And
Who
I
knew?
can echo that. I mean, you just some of it you have to learn on your own,
Mm-hmm.
and you get good by doing something wrong, right? And you just figure it out, and
Yeah.
you're like, that again, or I spent money on this and I shouldn't have spent money on that. And you try, and I tell people, look, try it out. Maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't, but here's my experience with it. I'm always honest
Mm-hmm.
about, did this bit of advertising work? Did my Amazon ads work? Did my Google ads work? Or, if I went to and it's weird, like you can see, because, you track the sales of your novels, you can see when things work. You can see a spike, and other times where you expect a spike and you come back and you're looking, and a couple of weeks later there is no spike, and you're like, man, that show went really well, or I got in front of 1,000 people at that convention and I expected more sales, and it doesn't work. And sometimes it feels like there's no rhyme and reason. You have to find the right patterns
Yeah.
uh, and things that you're comfortable with, and frankly, in many instances, especially for indie, things that you can afford. Or you just have to look at it as any other kind of business, like I do. It's like, look, I'm investing in this as a business. I know I'm not going to see this money back right away. It's a sunken cost. I may not ever get that money back, but it gives me a better chance of succeeding. And that's what I want on the back end. And so you just have to look at it in that respect.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the things, like when you're talking about ads, I I wish I was better at Amazon ads. I wish I was, because everybody who is good at that loves it. Then there are people who are like me who just can't figure it out. On the flip side, I've done advertising through Facebook, and that seems to work for me now. It took me a while, but it works for me now. And maybe I should get back into it, because all the algorithms are always changing, and there's so much stuff. I've never been really great at that particular one, and I wish I was. I
Yeah,
wish that was.
yeah, that's what I mean. It's just it sometimes it's a hit or miss. You know,
Hmm.
I have a friend in real life who was advertising a product that was made in Belgium and was only available in Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands, and Facebook was advertising it for them in Africa. It's like, why are you sending? No one's going to buy that. They can't buy it in Africa. So sometimes those ads, you just have to learn, like you said, you either have pay someone to do it for you that knows what they're doing, and then you've got to expect that there's a cost to doing that, or you've got to learn it and figure it out on your own, like you've done. And sometimes that's just through trial and error until you just get better at it. Like the Facebook stuff, it seems like that's taken off for you. So I just, and that's just one aspect of it. I find I get a lot of traction after conventions. I mean, and it's all nerds, right? It's all my geekathons, like, and they're cosplay folks, and they come up, and the one thing I did the one thing I did invest in that really worked out for me was a good book trailer. I have a friend of mine that did the first two book trailers for me, and he had 250,000 hits on Instagram for the making of, not the trailer itself, but the making of the trailer, where he was show how he had made the miniatures, and how he we got the right voiceover actor,
Hmm.
and all this stuff. And I thought to myself, I see a lot of the same stuff in trailers. Let's make this theatrical, and I realize I might not ever see this money back, but if someone goes to my website, or they visit me on social media and they see that, maybe they're like, oh man, that looks like a movie. And that's what I wanted to leave people with, is like, I want to go see that movie. Wait a minute, it's a book, and
Yep.
so it was a little bit different tact, but when we did the video, it got several thousand hits, and it was great, and it moved the needle on sales. And then he did the making of, and it was the background, how he was painting, and how he made a castle and thought it was too small, so he tore it down and made another castle. What I mean? Like,
Love it.
that thing just, it blew up. I don't want to say 265,000 hits was viral, but that's about as viral as a guy like me is going to get. So
Yeah.
I'm real happy with that. And so we're always going to do the making ofs in the behind the scenes, and I think folks like you and I can enjoy it, because our stuff is very visual.
Hmm.
You're writing your novels and I'm writing mine. You're describing a world, you're building that world, in someone's mind, and for them to see it kind of come to life in that way, I think that helps, promote the awareness that the books are out there, and then of course sales.
Well, now I feel bad. I was like, I did not look at your trailers, and now I have to go watch them, because
Go ahead.
I like looking at book trailers. There are a lot that look like they're very formulaic after a while, but the few that do something a little different, those are fantastic.
uh, this one's different. I saw them, and and we were going through a number of them, and I'm like, let's just do something different. Let's just do something. And he was a cinematographer, and he does everything from like Fashion Week in New York to
Wow.
music videos to my stuff. And I ran into him by accident at it was Free Comic Day last May, and I was giving away my first novel at the comic store, because I've always thought that this thing might bleed into something that could become a graphic novel. Uh,
Hmm.
Dave Prokopek, who's the guy who did it, approached me and said, I've got an idea. Let me show you this. And he showed me a video that he had made out of miniatures that was for Jurassic Park, and or he had one for Star Wars. It was bang on. He was just using it as like a case study. Like, this is what I can
Yeah.
do. And I was like, man, yeah, let me kind of run that by my publisher. Let's see, because my book trailer was like everybody else's, and it wasn't going to be impactful, but you have to have one, and blah blah blah.
Hmm.
And we went through the process, and when it came out on the backside, I couldn't have been happier with it. And it's led to things. You just have to think about, just finding a way to stand out in a crowd in the same way your book is trying to stand out on Amazon with all of these competitive books that are out there. How do you get it to pop when you come on TikTok Live or you go on a Facebook Live?
Yeah.
And you share that, and I think those things helped move the needle for me, and I hope they, if people take Dave up or someone like Dave up on doing that for them, maybe move the needle
I
for them.
have to go get some information from you after this. Because that is so neat. Now, and it's one of those things is, yes, you want to do what everybody expects you to do because that does help with sales to an extent, but you also need to make yourself unique enough that people remember you. Maybe it's your book trailer, maybe it's something a little different about your cover. Again, going back, yes, you need it to be genre specific, but still memorable where it's, unfortunately for me, and I know I'm going to probably get yelled at by someone, so apologies in advance, but there are so many books with swords, crowns, and ravens that they start, and skulls, that they start, especially I guess in the romance bracket, but they've all kind of started blending together, and I'm like, was that one or is that one the one with three crowns, or is that the one with the crown and the sword, or is that the one with this crown, sword, and skull? It's it's nice to, publish something that fits what people expect in that area. On the other hand, you want it to stand out too.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because that particular type of fantasy is maybe not my genre, so maybe I don't know the nuances, but looking at those type of covers, they all kind of blend together. And that's just my personal point of view.
They do, but that was the lesson I learned up front, and I got lucky, or else what I would have put together was not going to move the needle. And you listen to professionals and understand. Now, I'm not saying you have to go out and get a crown, a sword, and a raven for your
Mm-hmm.
cover, but I see that a lot too, like the dragon thing on cover.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all right, well, I know what I'm, and all it is pulling you in. It's like, look at me because I'm what you want to read,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
I get it, and it can be kind of tropish,
Yep.
or something you've
But
seen.
trope so.
Yeah, like, exactly. It's just like, oh, like I've seen that before. Like, how do I know what's different in here?
Mm-hmm.
Why is this going to be different from what I've read before? I think that's another thing. And I've gotten, exposure, I think because the covers, I think have hit home, but they've also been different. Like my book two has a cover of a Vermilion elf, which is an elven princess that I made wearing dark armor, swinging a sword, and in the background, library. You know what I mean? Like, who puts a library on the front of a book? I did. Like that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
it's or in the you want to the other thing is it doesn't necessarily have to be in the book to be on the cover, right? It just has to be something that's
That's
genre.
true.
So like I get that too, but look, it's worked for many, and like you said, it could be formulaic, but that's why I thought the book trailer was a calculated risk, doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I ran down a different path for that.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So, what are your plans going forward? Obviously you have your two books planned for next year. Are you already in the back of your mind working on what's next? I think you mentioned something about potentially a prequel novella or something along those lines. Do you have any plans after this series? Or are you going to just get to that point, take a breath, and see what happens from there?
Well, I think it's heading. There's a two forked road in front of me, and I'm going to be traveling both of them. To your point about second series, I think that as long as this one continues to grow and is as successful as the first two have been, the answer is yeah, I'd love to do another series. But in that same vein, I do have to take a beat, and it would be nice to have what I described earlier as these sort of like sidecar novels or novellas that focus on origin stories for some of the more popular characters or backstories about things that are going to be important in the future or stuff that people miss that they're always asking me about, like, well, how did this happen, or why did they do this, and things like that. And I think that's fun. The other tine of the fork is I've gotten lucky. I've licensed my intellectual property to the
Mm-hmm.
realm of Warminster to a video game company, and they're making an augmented reality, virtual reality game out of it that'll launch in 2024. And
That's so
so
cool.
I have to be part of that as well. And there's time that you're sinking into it where, I'm part of the storyboarding because the characters, your avatar that you would create in the realm of Warminster is going to be going through books 1 through 4, and we can't just stop at 4 if there's going to be a commitment to video games. It's got to go. As you level up as your avatar, you're going to expect more and more quests and adventures and things like that too. And so, I've started to reach out to other authors and bring them into the fold so that there are other parts of quests that they can do that are related to their books as well. So, by way of example,
Did I lose you?
uh,
Hold that. Hello?
there
Okay, call you back. Okay,
I got a
go
book.
back about 2 sentences. Go back about 2 sentences.
Yeah. So I brought in an author friend of mine. Her name is Danielle M. Orsino, and I met her just through an interview like this. And she has sort of like this high fantasy and this sort of fae kind of
Mhm.
fantasy for her stuff. And she created a really cool like standalone dragon character that we're going to take from her novels and put it in the realm of Warminster, and then you can cross market them. So fans of her novels will now also be fans of the
That
game.
is so
Hopefully that
fantastic.
translates to fans of my novels. So again thinking like a business. That's
Yeah.
how I've tried to do that. So we're in the stages now where we're looking for others, not just in fantasy, but what the Melderverse, which is the name of the company, the video game company, they're also looking for stuff on the sci-fi side as well, so that you can your character can walk off the bridge in Star Trek and walk right into some Tolkien-esque kind of realm, and you can play it that way too. It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot like Ready Player One, except at the Pong stage, right? Like the
So
very
great
first,
though.
so that's where we are. And so I'm committed enough that I've got one that's the path of the books, and we have to keep going. But the other one was one that came out of nowhere, because I'm sure you get asked a lot too, like who's going to play your characters in the movie, and or in the Netflix series, and you're like, you stagger around that. And here it was, I didn't think the video game thing was ever going to be in the cards, and all of a sudden I get contacted out of nowhere. They're like, hey, we read your stuff, we like it, would you be interested in licensing? And it was a business decision, and I think it's the right one. And we'll see, knock on wood, 15 months from now where we are. But we're halfway through it now and getting there, and it's been fun being on the team that's really kind of storyboarding the game. And as a gamer myself, it's just fun to see how that's done behind the curtain.
Well, keep me posted on this because this is absolutely fantastic. And
Sure, yeah.
as as an author and artist on the side, I love things that are different ways of expressing creativity. Video games is one of them, and definitely let me know. This is really intriguing to me. I kind of want to see how this goes and maybe play it when it's out.
I'll make sure you get, you're in there. You'll get the first download.
Ooh, thank you. This is really neat. No, I love that. And you are the first person I ever talked to so far that has, I've heard about, converting books to movies and all these other things, but never video games. And I like this. This is very intriguing to me.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't expect it. It was like you expect one day that someone might call, and then you get a little deeper into the business of movies and Netflix and stuff, and you realize that they those studios are out of the game of taking risks. They're never going to, unless you have a 500,000 followers, or
Yeah, they're very,
they're
yes.
not even going to talk to you, regardless of how good your stuff is. They just want, if they're investing in it, they want to know that they can extrapolate sales and data analytics
Mhm.
based on your followers. And if you're not
It's
there,
hard. Yeah.
there do these other things. So, great story aside, mine, yours, anybody's, it's just not how they do business formulaically these days, and so they'll go out and find Neil Gaiman and do his stuff, or Wheel of Time and do their stuff, because they know that they've got a base of people that will buy it. So it's just building to get there, and video
Exactly.
will launch, and we'll get to there one day.
2024. I'm going to be looking forward to it. That is
Oh,
fantastic.
that's a long way away. It's not. It's really like
It
15.
really isn't. No, I was gonna
Yeah.
say this year is almost over, so you're talking about a year and some change, year and a half. That's
Like,
so neat,
yeah. So it's
and
been.
it's amazing. Also, just listening, if you're still in like working, finalizing the storyboard process for it, that on the animation side for the video game, that can be completed in that amount of time. I don't know. I know a few animators, and it still just wows me how quickly they can turn a product because I feel like there's 1,000 more steps than it is painting something. On the painter side,
I'm
but
with
I
you.
guess it's fascinating.
They've got a skill set, and I'm sure the computer takes over and does certain things for them. But like, I don't get it. Like, I'll give them a suggestion, and 2 days later, it's like, it's there. you see it, and you're like, wow, they did that in 2 days, and it took me a year to write a book. You're like, ugh, like where did I miss this? Because I think that's pretty cool. But I agree with you. I mean, I don't have that kind of talent. I don't have the. I'm not an illustrator. I'm not a. I could never be a 3D designer or model. It's just not in my DNA. But I look at them as sort of, this is maybe the weirdest analogy, but they're sort of like police sketch artists. Like you tell them something and they come back and you're like, damn, that's pretty close. You know,
That's pretty good. How did
it's
you do that?
like, well, you did us a great job describing it. And I'm like, no, I did. I gave you like 5 sentences. Like I was hoping you'd kind of figure it out. you know, it's like, oh yeah, I like 80s anime with a spin. And it has to look like Robotech. And it's you're like, what? Like, and out of that is born this cover or this character that you're going to see in a video game, and it's a lot of fun.
Well, how does it feel then to see someone actually doing these dimensional art pieces based off things you created out of your
That's humbling, right? You
yeah.
see them come to life, and in your head, you've got this no, and that's why I tell people a lot of that. Like you hear this a lot where people say, "Well, the book is different." Of course, the book is different. Like when you write something, and I'm reading your novel in my head, I've created, and then you go see a movie, and that's someone else's creation, and you're like, "Well, that's not what was in my head." So I don't like it as much as I like the book because the book is you. You own
Yeah.
what happened in that book. It's now in your head. And for this, you're trying to come as close to that as you can, where you're describing to somebody what a monster looks like, or what a city looks like, or what a realm looks like. And we did a little slew of social media on the first one that came back last week from our designer, and just put it out through the video game company Melderverse, and push that out alongside with my social media. And you see it, and you're like, wow, this guy just drew the front part of the most important castle in the novel, and it just popped to life. And we're just showing people the snippet of it, and the reaction to that is great. And from my side, you're like, man, did I create that? Did that really come out of my head? Yeah, and that's what I mean by humbling. And you see other people being able to interpret what you're saying, and they're almost bang
Mhm.
on, almost like tap dead center, and you're like,
Ah, I love
good,
it.
you know. So humbling is the way I would describe it.
I love it. Now, in your writing, this is something that I found interesting as an epic fantasy author in your writing. Especially you were mentioning you like to do a lot of descriptions, and that's for probably your scenes and settings and everything. How much description do you do for your main characters? Because there are authors who some even don't even describe their main character outside of maybe their name, and you build it yourself. Others do every detail to where they have a patch on their elbow from all that kind of stuff. So how much descriptions do you give in your book, in your writing, for your main characters, and how much do you leave open to interpretation?
Yeah, so it's a bit of both, but I lean on the heavy side because of
Mhm.
spring days. And I think part of it is, and I tell people this a lot when they're reading like a cozy mystery, or they're reading, a suspense novel or whatever. And I say that, we got in the car and drove down the street. 2 sentences, I know exactly what happened, right? But in our realm, when I'm creating races, and when I say vermilion elf, no one knows what that is except unless I describe it. So you tell them they're vermilion because they have crimson eyes and crimson hair and alabaster skin, and they look a certain way, and you have to go deep into those descriptions so that they know what it is that they should be seeing. And
Mhm.
sometimes reasons for that. Like one of the bad guys in the book is this, like, I call them cryptids. It's my, I guess said before, like my name for monsters. It's this magically enhanced man that became this monster based on the bad guy turning him into a monster. And it was called the Antlered Man. And if I said Antlered Man, it didn't describe him, you would think it's a guy with horns on his head. It looks like Rudolph. But instead, you say he's 10 foot tall. He's got hooves like he stands, he can run on all four legs, but he can stand tall on his, like these cloven hooves that he has. Looks like a goat. He's got these, spindly fingers, and, he smell, and you give them that, and all of a sudden they're there with you, and they're
Yeah.
like, see this creature, I smell this creature, in some cases it smells like bile and copper, and you
Yeah.
want kind of like really pungent odors to pop in someone's mind when they're reading it.
Mhm.
You can't do that by skimming along. And when you're doing a world that you're creating and people don't know what the antlered man is, you can't leave it blank. You have to go deep and describe what it is they're looking at, in the hopes that you're hitting home, and at least in their head they're seeing something as gruesome as you're trying to describe it.
That is, I love that. Absolutely love that. Well, since we've actually rounded an hour, let me ask you before, I don't want to not ask you this. I love this question. Is there anything that we haven't touched base on that you would love potential readers to know about you and your work?
Yeah. So, and this is going to be out of the blue. You're not going to expect me to say this, I hope.
Okay.
But the main character in my novels um, a man named Damus Alaric, and Damus
Mm-hmm.
is a prophet. He's a seer, and his power of seeing is very much like Edgar Cayce's was in the early 1900s. He would see when he would dream. It's a form of or like an oracular prophecy that he would have. Unlike Nostradamus, people read cards, they read bones, they burn candles, and they some people look into mirrors. Well, Damus sees the future when he looks into his dreams. And that came from a real experience I had. When I wrote his fear based on a set of recurring nightmares I had when I was his age, when I was like 16, 17, 18, into my college years. I had this set of recurring nightmares where this man would come and visit me and told me he was my guardian angel, but he was the most terrifying creature. That, in your mind, you're like, I'm free. Like, while I'm sweating and I'm shaking, and it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a recurrence where it wasn't the same dream over and over. It's when I would stop dreaming, I would then the next dream would pick up almost right off of the last one, and they were 3, sometimes 6 months apart. These weren't, I didn't have them commonly, but whenever I would get them, it would feel different, and it would feel different immediately. And so I used that. What I'm going to say is sort of a terrifying post adolescent, because I was in college for the last few, kind of fear and horror that I'd felt as part of that, and I tried to encapsulate that into the novel so that writers or readers of it could feel that too and know why he was so upset. And he was getting, and of course, his nightmares were my nightmares on steroids, right? So like, I had a little nightmare, I sweated it out, I was a little, for second period at school or whatever, I was a little tipsy. In his case, it affects him in a way where he soils himself, he can't sleep, he's losing energy, and it's something that really impacts and sets the scene for why he and the bad guy hate one another. Like, that's at the core of this entire first series, and you don't learn it in book one, you get hints at it, right? And it's that
Yeah.
sort of slow burn, like, give me another clue, give me another clue, how are these guys linked? And he's linked to him through this onoramancy, which is the prophecy that comes to you when you're dreaming. And so I try to use a real life experience to build it into a fantasy novel, and then throw some jet fuel on it.
I love that.
So
I
I hope
love
that
that.
answers the question.
Absolutely love that. Now, let me ask you one more thing before I forget. Also, where can people find your work if they want to find, more about you? Obviously, you're on this platform, but where else are you? We'll be reposting this on YouTube and have all your links that I can find below. But for anybody right now,
Yeah, no, well, thank you for letting me do that. I'm easy to find. I mean, JV Hilliard, HILLIARD.com will take you to my website. JV Hilliard Books will bring you here for TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. And JV Hilliard, you can find me on Facebook and Discord there. And if you're looking to purchase the novels, you can find them pretty ubiquitously. You can go to Dragon Moon Press, which is the best place to buy them. So go to dragonmoonpress.com, or if you want to, wander to Amazon or any of the other distribution channels, you can get an ebook or a paperback there. And audiobooks are available on almost 20 different platforms, most popular being Audible, of course. And I've been blessed to have Victor Bavine, who is a well-known voiceover actor for fantasy adventure novels, do mine. And he's got his own sort of cult following there, and does a bunch of folks that are running around my space. And so I've been sell books off of him too. So not just me, his name, and I'll tell him that. And I have to buy him a beer every time I see him. But you can find the audiobooks there.
oh, that's great. Absolutely great. But no, I love just talking to other epic fantasy authors, and I will be adding your books onto my ever expanding wish list that I use to help remind me. It's like my virtual TBR list. I use them and I cycle through them, so I always remember what books I'm going to get next. So I'm definitely going to add yours on there because
Thank you.
they sound so fascinating to me.
when you get to them. Yes, please let me know.
I will. I will. Is there anything else you want to cover? And if not, thank you for joining.
No, my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, and have me back anytime whenever you need someone that can ramble on as long as I can. I think that more than happy to come back and have another discussion, whether it's on this or something else that's relevant to the business or the genre, or wherever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Like, maybe some point next year, I do these weekly. So, I definitely love coming back and especially talking to people again, because then you get into some a little deeper conversations than you do on some of the superficial stuff you
Yeah.
do in the first meet and greets. So, absolutely.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
See you now.
Bye.